Hi Year 7, so this week is going to be a relatively quick video. It's on religious beliefs and practices in ancient Egypt. So religious beliefs dominated the lives of the ancient Egyptians. Nearly everything in their world was seen as being controlled by hundreds of deities, gods and goddesses. Their beliefs greatly influenced how they lived, what they built and how they waged war. These beliefs also shaped their views about death and how they prepared for it. The ancient Egyptians believed that one group of gods created the world and its living things, while another group controlled the forces of nature. There were also gods of fertility, wisdom, love, music and dance, death, health and childbirth. The sun god Ra, or Re, was the most important god. And that's important for later, guys. The Egyptians believed that he rode across the sky each day in a boat. Ra is often depicted with the sun symbol on his head. He is said to travel alongside Nut, the universal mother, during the day and night. Endlessly she swallows the sun at night and gives birth to it again each morning. So the traditions and ceremonies. The ancient Egyptians built many temples where priests and priestesses served the gods and goddesses they believed lived there. The priests burnt incense, made offerings and held festivals. Ordinary people made shrines within their homes, where they said prayers and often left offerings. So that's important too, guys. People played instruments such as a sistra to keep away evil spirits. They also wore amulets to attract the protection or goodwill of the gods. You may want to remember that section. So the animal gods. So some of you will remember these from what you've done in class, but you'll also note that our houses for remote learning are about the animal gods. So many gods throughout ancient Egypt were represented with the heads or bodies of animals. For example, the goddess of war, Sekhmet, was shown as a lion, and the god of water, Sobek, was represented as a crocodile. As a result, many priests and priestesses kept crocodiles as pets and spoilt them with offerings of food. The Egyptian goddess Bastet, the protector of homes, was shown as a cat. The ancient Egyptians valued cats highly, not only out of respect for Bastet, but also because they protected their grain stores by killing vermin such as mice and rats. Households treated cats very well. Harming or killing a cat was often punished by death. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote that when a cat in ancient Egypt died, the occupants of the house would mourn and often shave their eyebrows to show their loss. So here you can see a picture of an Egyptian mummified cat. So they used to mummify their cats as well when they died. That's how important they were. So here's some of the sacred animals as gods. So you can see Sobek here is a crocodile. It was an ibis was Thoth. Linus was Sekhmet. Amun-Ra was the god of the sun, or if you go with Ra, depend on how you wanted to, which dynasty you followed. The cow was Hathor. Falcon was Horus. And the jackal or the dog was Anubis.
In the beginning there was nothing. The universe consisted of a great chaotic ocean, and Benben emerged amid this primal chaos. Benben was a huge pyramidal mound. There was a lotus flower with Benben, and this, when it blossomed, brought the god Ra to the world, and light came with him. Ra by himself generated the first generations of gods. Shu, the god of the air, and Tefnut, the goddess of rain, were born. The universe was enwrapped by a vast mass of primordial waters. Shu and Tefnut plunged into the waters to explore its immensity. Ra felt afflicted after realizing that their children were taking a long time to return, and fearing never seeing them again, he sent his best messenger to find them. Shu and Tefnut returned safe and sound, and Ra's joy was so immense that human beings were born from his tears. After returning, Their children generated in turn Geb, the god of the earth, and Nut, the goddess of the sky, and thus the sky and the earth were created. The great god Ra sovereignly ruled the universe power, and he was awarded the title of the first pharaoh. The god gifted Egypt with several sacred animals like the ox and the lion, but his greatest offering was the creation of the Nile River. Around its shores, men would edify a civilization glorifying the gods. But Ra had a premonition that his grandchildren would give birth to a new generation of gods who would put an end to his reign. And so the great god forbade the sky and the earth to have any offspring whatsoever. But Nut and Geb disobeyed and gave rise to a powerful offspring: Isis, Neph, Seth, and Osiris. They dethroned Ra, and Osiris started to reign over the world. But the new god's throne was not safe, because his brother Seth was eager to take all power for himself. And so the saga of Egyptian gods began. After deposing the god Ra, the deity who gave origin to the Egyptian world, Osiris became the new god of the universe. The new supreme god took the goddess Isis as his wife and started a reign of great prosperity. Osiris brought civilization to men, who, until that point, lived quite primitively. The god taught them agriculture, weaving, and how to make bread. Besides that, he decreed the use of laws, which would give order to chaos. The Egyptian civilization began to flourish under the reign of the benevolent god Osiris. However, Osiris had a powerful and ambitious brother, Seth. His kingdom stood in the arid desert around Egypt, and so he was jealous of his brother, who had a fertile and prosperous kingdom. Osiris had an affair with Nephthys, Set's wife, and Anubis, the god of the dead, emerged from this union. Angered by his brother's betrayal, Set prepared his revenge. The god of the dry lands and personification of evil invited Osiris for a great feast in his honor. During the feast, Seth gifted the guests with a beautiful coffin and said he would offer it to the one who fit into it perfectly. Osiris decided to try it, and, immediately after settling in, Seth closed the coffin, trapping the god. The evil god threw the coffin into the Nile, drowning the supreme god. Isis wept profoundly after losing her beloved husband, and these tears poured into the Nile River, giving rise to its traditional floods. The goddess and her sister Nephthys looked for Osiris's body, and Isis, after finding it, tried to hide it, but Seth spotted it nonetheless and smashed it into 42 pieces, spreading them throughout Egypt. Isis, with Anubis's help, managed to recover the pieces, and, under the guidance of the god of the dead, she mummified Osiris. Using her divine powers, the goddess was able to resurrect her love, but Osiris would now reign over the world of the dead. After coming back to life, Osiris had a son with Isis. His name was Horus, and he swore he would defeat Seth, the usurper of the throne that was his by right. Seth, the god of destruction, had murdered Osiris, the god who reigned supreme in Egyptian mythology. Set took the throne from his brother for himself and unleashed his reign of terror. Nevertheless, Osiris had generated an heir together with the goddess Isis. His name was Horus. This was a falcon god, whose prophecy said that he would reign over the skies and would bring the light back to Egypt, ending the darkness brought by Set. Horus, already an adult, decided to claim his throne, which had been usurped by his uncle. The contention is judged by the gods, while the court, presided over by the sun god Ra, decided who would be worthy to sit on the throne. A series of clashes between Set and Horus had begun. Set had Ra's sympathy, since the usurper protected the sun god from the serpent Apophis, while the latter crossed the skies. Set proposed a challenge to Horus. Both would have to transform themselves into hippos and should be submerged for 3 months. Horus relied on his mother, the goddess Isis, to take advantage of Set's vulnerability to kill him. The goddess felt sympathy for Set and could not kill him. This betrayal enraged Horus, who then attacked his mother, cutting off her head. The god Thoth, the deity of knowledge, saved the goddess, replacing the severed head with a cow's head. The clash between Set and Horus continued for many years. When fighting in the desert, Set managed to pluck Horus's eyes. Due to Hathor's help, the goddess of love, Horus had his vision restored. The court of gods demanded a reconciliation between Set and Horus. The evil god, pretending to be benevolent, invited Horus for a feast in his palace. During the night, Set tried to abuse his nephew, making him unworthy to the throne. However, Horus managed to defend himself and prevented the god's poisonous seed. Horus decided to take revenge and, with the help of the goddess Isis, the god placed his divine seed in lettuce leaves, which were then offered to Set by the goddess Isis. The god of barren deserts ate the contaminated lettuce. Poisoned, Set started to deteriorate in front of everyone, and a golden disc emerged in his forehead. Thoth grabbed the bright disc and ingrained it in her own head. Seth had been humiliated, and that was when, after 80 years, the court granted Horus the throne that was his by right. Isis couldn't be more proud to see her son, with Osiris assuming the father's throne. Set's fate was to travel with Ra, the sun god of the skies, and his enraged screams could be heard with thunder. And so, Horus's reign over Egypt began, and all the pharaohs who one day reigned over Egypt were among his descendants. Ra is the sun god in Egyptian mythology. This god is usually depicted as a being with a man's body and a head of a falcon. The sun disk is over his head. He had been one day the greatest of all gods, but time wore him down, and finding himself too old, he decided to relinquish the power and go to the skies. This god is one of the most revered figures in Egyptian mythology. As the sun god, one of his duties was to drive away the darkness, and to accomplish his work, the god crossed the skies on his sunboat, lighting the whole world. But when the twilight came, he and his vessel plunged into the sea waters towards the underworld. There he would have to sail through the dark world and cross the 12 gates, which would be the 12 regions of the netherworld. Ra took an hour to go through each gate. Osiris was in one of them, the lord of the underworld, whom Ra always visited to pay his respects. But before leaving the underworld's darkness, the god was attacked by the terrible snake Apophis. This force of chaos tried to destroy the god's vessel, and each day the serpent seemed closer to accomplish her desire. Apophis once managed to swallow the sunboat, putting an end to the sunlight in the morning. But the serpent failed to hold the god in her stomach and regurgitated him. This event was marked as a solar eclipse. However, destroying Ra's boat became more difficult, since Set, the god of destruction, after losing the dispute of the supreme throne for Horus, had been condemned to navigate with Ra across the skies. He helped the sun god, defending his vessel against the terrible serpent, defeating it several times, making Ra's underworld journey safer. The god Ra was a figure worshipped throughout Egypt, but this god was especially adored in the city of Heliopolis. The god's prestige was so vast that other traditions of Egyptian religions of antiquity merged the god's depiction along with the greatest figure of their own pantheons. For instance, the figures of the supreme gods Amun and Atum were also known as Amun-Ra and Atum-Ra. The god's name was used by many pharaohs. Ramses is a well-known example. His name means son of Ra, or the son of sun, and so the pharaoh would strengthen his divinity before his subjects. Anubis, the god with a jackal head, is a deity of the Egyptian mythology connected to life after death. The god is one of the most ancient Egyptian deities and therefore his role changed as the centuries went by. Anubis was already considered the main deity linked to death and the underworld's god, but this role was transferred to the god Osiris. The jackal god was also considered the god of embalming and mummifications. In funeral rites, it was common to see a priest wearing a jackal mask during the mummification process. The god was also considered as the protector of tombs and cemeteries, therefore protecting the bodies of those who went to the underworld. Anubis is the son of the goddess Nephthys, wife of Set. But his son was not born of the union with her husband, since Nephthys had been disguised as the goddess Isis, and so she mingled with Osiris. Set, coming to terms with that act of disloyalty, plotted against Osiris, killing him and scattering his body parts throughout Egypt. After Isis gathered all the parts, Anubis helped the goddess during the god's funeral ritual. So Anubis transformed the body of Osiris into the first mummy. Anubis became the deity that led the spirit of the dead to the underworld, where the dead would be judged by a court presided over by Anubis. The god placed the deceased's heart in Osiris's scale and the feather of truth on the other side. If the heart was heavier than the feather, it indicated that it was full of wickedness. He was then delivered to Ammit, a demonic creature known as the Heart Devourer. If the feather was heavier than the light heart of the soul of the righteous and good, Anubis would take the person to Osiris, and the deceased stepped into life after death. In the period of Greek rule over Egypt, the god Anubis was associated with Hermes, which in Greek mythology is also a deity that led souls to the underworld. This association gave rise to a deity called Hermanubis, which became popular during the period of Roman rule. Anubis is certainly one of the most popular divinities in Egyptian mythology, the god accountable to lead souls to the afterlife. Bastet is the cat goddess in Egyptian mythology, depicted as having a woman's body with a cat's head. The Egyptians devoted great honors to cats. They were considered sacred animals. The felines had a meaningful role in the Egyptian world since, thanks to them, their food was safe from rodent infestations. Also, cats could scare treacherous, poisonous snakes. Bastet is a goddess associated with the sun, and because of that, the goddess followed Ra during the day in his solar boat, crossing through the skies. At night, the goddess turned into a cat, and, attentive, the goddess protected the world against the dreadful serpent Apophis. The goddess was worshipped throughout Egypt. Doing harm to any cat was a terrible sacrilege. The author of such a violent act could be punished with death. Cats were seen as family members, and according to some reports, whenever a house was set ablaze, the cats entered the burning house to help their residents escape the fire. Sometimes, these cats appeared to be dead in the flames, but they returned to life thanks to the goddess Bastet, emphasizing the popular saying of a 9-life cat. For being sacred animals, cats were mummified, and Egypt has cemeteries dedicated to these animal mummies. According to some versions, the goddess Bastet is linked to Sekhmet, the lion goddess. This goddess was violent and bloodthirsty, but was tamed, becoming a gentle and milk-drinking cat goddess. In other versions, Bastet and Sekhmet were sisters and Ra's daughters. Even after the end of the worship of the Egyptian gods, cats, to this day, continue to look men up and down, hoping to have their deity acknowledged again.
Sorry guys, that was a long video. I suspect most of you have fast forwarded most of that, but it is very helpful to actually complete that section, as it'll help you with the worksheet. So this week you'll need to explain the roles, appearance and the importance of the Egyptian gods. You'll need to complete a worksheet found in Compass Learning Task titled Egyptian Gods Worksheet, and the explanation for this worksheet is there should you need it. Please be aware I've given you all the information you need either in a link which is on the worksheet or in this PowerPoint. So the extension task for this week, what you need to do is open up Compass Learning Task for week 6, and you'll see that it says extension image. What you need to do is open up that image, and you are to annotate the image located in Compass Learning Tasks and describe what you think this image is displaying. The video that you most likely skipped actually does give a rundown of this particular image, or at least a version of it. And so you need to describe what you think this image is displaying, and then identify the different gods within it. So actually, put pointers to which god you think it is. You are then to describe what the story about the sun god Ra served for Egyptians. So why was that particular story about Ra important? Make comparisons with other cultures who use stories such as this to explain life on Earth. So you may want to use the Dreamtime story and how that created people, or you may want to make comparisons to the to the Greek or the Roman version of how life was created. It's completely up to you. And then answer the question of, if you had a choice, what animal would you most like to be in ancient Egypt, and give an explanation as to why. Remember, the extension task is optional. So the creative task for this week is the Egyptian God flipbook. For the Egyptian creative task this week, you can choose to make an Egyptian God flipbook. It is optional, of course. This worksheet is also under learning tasks under week 6 and is titled Creative Egyptian God Flipbook. It is just an image. You print it off. It should be fairly simple. This task involves you creating a flipbook that is stapled at the top so that the heads of the gods change. The god should be coloured in beforehand. The name of the god should be at the top. So what you do is, once you staple those little boxes to the top of the big long one, all you need to do is flip it up, and so the heads will change but the bodies stay the same. And that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. So the references for this week, this is the only one that I've used. Plus the textbook. Thank you to those people who have created them in advance. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.